Then the next step is what we call the learn stage. The learn stage. And what the learn stage is when you're learning about what the other person knows about water treatment. It's like you're learning from the customer. You're finding out how do they treat their water. What do they, where do they get their water from? How do they store it after they have treated it? You'll notice that the storybook is set up in such a way as to get people's attention about water. The very first 2 pages about the 2 glasses of water, and then the page with the 1 glass of water, is to get their attention. After that, then you can start having a conversation about what makes people sick. In fact, it's not what you see that makes you sick, but it's really what you can't see that makes you sick. When you see that glass of dirty water, that you would not drink, right? Do you realize that glass of dirty water might not have any bacteria in it whatsoever? And that the clean glass, or the clear glass of water, might be loaded with bacteria. Absolutely loaded with bacteria that you can't see unless you have a magnifying glass to be able to see it. Many people do not know that, and what they end up doing is all they do is look at the cleanliness of the water. Oh, the water is clear, so it must be safe. The truth is, if it's not been treated properly, then most likely it's got bacteria, the tiny little bacteria in there, right? That's intended to get your customer, the prospect who's sitting down with you, to start thinking about how safe is my water? Am I really treating it right? Because I used to just look at it and think it was clean, but now maybe it's not so clean. And then we want to share some facts with them about how people get sick with bacteria and viruses and what kind of damage it creates. Okay? Share some facts with them. And then we share with them the more recent news from this last year, which was about the cholera outbreak, which is the very same thing, the same problem. It just happens to be cholera this time. And then at this point, you simply ask the person you're talking to, have you ever known anyone, perhaps a friend or maybe a family member, who's gotten sick from drinking water that had bacteria in it? So now you begin a conversation with them. So it becomes very personal to them. Well, my daughter once got very sick and we had to go to the doctor and we had this, or I had an uncle one time, or we had a whole outbreak in our village one time. You hear stories like that. So that's a very important piece right there. That's a very important part, is where you're asking the question, have you ever known anyone, perhaps a friend or a family member, that's ever had diarrhea, serious diarrhea like that? Then at that point, after you've had a little bit of conversation about that, then it's just 3 simple questions. Number 1, where do you get your drinking water from? Where does it come from? Is it rainwater? Is it on the river? Is it, where do you get it from? Secondly, how do you treat it? And thirdly, how do you store it after you treat it? And then even ask them about how do they dispense their water? How do they get the water out of the jug to drink it? Because if they say, oh, we just, so this is giving you some important information, isn't it? It provides you these 4 questions are providing you with some very important information that you then can kind of respond to in a few minutes when you're telling them about Toonside and telling them about the science of clean water. And then the last one, this last page here, is saying basically, treating water can be a real pain. It can be a real, sort of difficult thing to have to deal with all the time. This is particularly true. This page is particularly set up for people who boil. Okay, it's really geared for people who boil water. If you find out that on this page, as they treat their water by boiling, then you're going to want to make this page very personal to their situation. So tell me, where do you get your firewood from? And how often do you have to boil your water? How often do you do that? And then Where do you store it afterwards? And so it's a very personal thing for them about all of the steps they have to go through. And so then the very last page is the transition into the education step. This is where you're going to be moving from learn to educate. It's basically saying, there is a better way to do this. And in fact, it's safe, convenient, and will save you money. Now, this is just the beginning of the Clean Water Storybook, okay? This is the learn step. We're going to be adding the educate step to it. He was learning about the situation. That learning step is to just learn and understand what the situation is. Because once you understand the situation, then you know how to respond to it. What he did for that family was he got them to start thinking again about something that they do every day that they just have forgotten about. And every one of you is going to tell the story a little bit differently because you each have a different personality. These are the key things that you need to be, every family needs to see each of these steps because it helps to build the story so they can understand what it is that they can do differently.